Have you ever wondered why an ancient religion was buried, erased from history? Why were these great beliefs, which once built mighty empires, forced into the shadows? Could it be that what we know about African religions, about the beliefs of our ancestors, are just stories hidden from us? Let's uncover the secrets that have been kept from us for thousands of years. What is it that has been hidden for so long? These ancient beliefs once helped establish powerful civilizations, such as Egypt, Nubia, and Mali, empires that shaped the course of world history. But today, what do we really know about them other than faded images? Why did governments and churches want to eliminate these beliefs? And can we reclaim the truth from distorted history? In this video, you will uncover the full truth about a religion that has been concealed, a great heritage that has been taken from us. You will understand why this religion became a threat to colonial empires and the religious powers of the West. Moreover, you will see its widespread influence in today's modern culture. These rituals are not just traditions. They are spiritual forces that continue to resonate in music, dance, and festivals we still celebrate today. Let's explore why political forces feared the power of this African religion. From myths that were erased to its influence on the Bible, every story will be revealed now. Together, we will rediscover the truth about the African religious legacy and experience the healing power of these once forgotten beliefs. Share your thoughts on these revelations, and don't forget to hit like, subscribe, so you won't miss out on more inspiring stories and truths that could change how you view the world. The ancient African religion. For thousands of years, an ancient African religion stood as the backbone of powerful civilizations. These faiths weren't merely beliefs. They were the very fabric of life, shaping empires and influencing entire cultures. When we think of ancient Africa, we often think of vast deserts, rich traditions, and majestic kingdoms like Egypt, Nubia, and Mali. But what if I told you that these civilizations, revered for their power and wisdom, were deeply rooted in a religious system that has been mostly erased from history? A system that intertwined spirituality and political strength in ways that shook the world. From the moment ancient African religions emerged, they served as the guiding light for kings, queens, and entire societies. In Egypt, the pharaohs weren't just rulers. They were considered divine beings, intermediaries between the gods and humans. The ancient Egyptians knew that their land's prosperity was tied not only to the earth and the sun, but to the very spirits that walked alongside them. The religion of ancient Egypt, with its rich pantheon of gods and goddesses, structured not just the spiritual lives of the people, but their daily existence, their laws, their art, their science, and their very identity. Every aspect of life was informed by spiritual practices, whether in the monumental pyramids or the sacred rituals performed to honor the gods. This wasn't merely a religious system. It was a way of life that ensured balance, peace, and power. Take, for example, the ancient kingdom of Mali, a land where gold flowed like rivers and scholars flocked to its famous universities. The Mali Empire's wealth wasn't just a result of their vast resources, but also of their deeply ingrained spiritual and cultural practices. The king, often seen as a divine figure, would communicate with spirits and ancestors to guide his rule. The faith of the Mali people wasn't confined to personal belief. It was a collective force, a source of unity that bound their society together. It was their faith that gave them the courage to stand against invaders, and their spirituality that kept their culture intact through centuries of challenges. In these ancient empires, religion wasn't simply about personal salvation. It was a communal experience, a collective energy that transcended the individual and connected entire nations. It was about harmony between the spiritual and earthly realms, a delicate balance that kept society in order. African spirituality taught that everything, every tree, every river, every stone, was sacred. Nature wasn't something to be conquered, but revered. Yet in the blink of an eye, this way of life was almost forgotten, eclipsed by the rise of colonial powers. In the process, the deep spiritual connection that had once bound African societies together was dismissed, rewritten, and erased. Today, when we look at the remnants of African history, we see echoes of this rich spiritual heritage hidden beneath layers of misinformation and misinterpretation. Why was this religion hidden and erased? The truth behind why these ancient African religions were suppressed and pushed into the shadows isn't just a story of cultural erasure. It's a story of power, fear, and control. The colonial powers and Christian missionaries feared the immense strength these religions held. The very unity, the very power that allowed these societies to flourish was a direct threat to their own systems of domination. A religion that could unite nations, that could inspire rebellion and resistance, was too dangerous to be allowed to thrive. Christianity, which spread throughout Europe and later the Americas, was not just a spiritual force. It became a political tool. As European powers expanded, they saw in African spirituality a direct challenge to their authority. The belief systems that had guided African empires for centuries were labeled as pagan or savage, and a coordinated effort was made to replace them with a westernized version of Christianity. Take the example of how missionaries arrived on African shores with the goal of converting the population to Christianity. They didn't just preach, they destroyed sacred temples, burned holy books, and sought to replace indigenous beliefs with their own. They saw the strength in these beliefs, and rather than fostering understanding, they sought to obliterate them, fearing that the faith of the African people could inspire rebellion and unity. Entire systems of belief, thousands of years in the making, were disregarded as inferior, as primitive. But why was this so? Why did these religions, which brought peace and prosperity to so many, provoke such fear? It wasn't just the ritualistic elements, the gods, or the practices that frightened them. It was the understanding that African spirituality was deeply connected to the land, to ancestry, and to power. In a time when empires were at war and colonial expansion was rampant, the idea that a unified spiritual system could challenge the colonial order was too much to bear. This suppression was not just about religion, it was about erasing a worldview that didn't align with the colonial agenda. The truth is, these religions weren't inferior or primitive. They were complex, deep, and spiritually enriching systems of belief that connected communities, fostered resilience, and shaped entire civilizations. What the colonizers feared wasn't a mere set of beliefs, but the strength of a people bound together by a spiritual truth that transcended borders, language, and time. But even in the face of such adversity, African spiritual practices didn't vanish. They adapted. They blended. They survived in the hearts of those who still carried the legacy of their ancestors. These beliefs lived on in the rhythms of African drums, the movement of dancers, and the stories told by the firelight. These beliefs were not erased, they were transformed. And now, as we dive into the modern world, we begin to see the true depth of these spiritual systems. African spirituality continues to thrive, not just in Africa, but across the globe. It is the heartbeat of African music, of Caribbean dance, of the diasporic experience. The power that once terrified colonial empires is now a global force, healing, uniting, and inspiring people from all walks of life. In the end, the lesson is clear. The power of African religion wasn't in its temples or statues. It was in its ability to bring people together, to challenge the status quo, and to create change. Today, as we rediscover these truths, we find that we are not just learning about history, we are reconnecting with a source of healing, of unity, and of strength that is needed more than ever in today's world. The power of these ancient beliefs, once suppressed, is now rising again. And as it does, we begin to understand that these ancient African religions were not just beliefs of the past. They are a living, breathing force that continues to shape the world today. The influence of this religion in today's culture. Have you ever found yourself dancing to a rhythm, feeling a pulse in your veins, as if the music itself was alive, reaching deep within your soul? Have you noticed how certain melodies or movements can awaken a sense of connection to something greater than yourself? This is no coincidence. The essence of ancient African spirituality continues to flow through the rhythms of today's music, dance, and festivals, carrying with it the power of healing, unity, and transformation. The influence of African religions is far-reaching, subtly weaving its way into the very fabric of modern life, even when we are unaware. Let's consider the powerful impact of African spirituality on music. From the pounding of drums in African ceremonies to the rhythmic beats of modern-day jazz, blues, and even hip-hop, there's an undeniable thread that connects the music of today with the spiritual practices of ancient times. The same drums that once echoed through the night, calling upon the ancestors and invoking divine energy, continue to pulse through the beats that fill our world today. Take the example of the famous jazz musicians like John Coltrane, or the deep blues of artists like Muddy Waters. These artists didn't just play music, they carried forward the rhythms and melodies of their African heritage, infusing their compositions with a spiritual energy that transcends mere sound. Even modern-day pop stars like Beyoncé and Rihanna draw from these deep cultural roots in their music and performances, unknowingly, or perhaps knowingly, channeling the ancient power that once united entire communities through dance, song, and ritual. Their music is more than entertainment. It's a continuation of a sacred tradition. But the influence goes beyond music. The energy of African spirituality can also be seen in dance, particularly in the movements that symbolize life, growth, and connection to the divine. African dance, with its powerful and fluid movements, wasn't just a form of artistic expression, it was a spiritual act. Each gesture was a prayer, each step a tribute to the ancestors. Today, dance styles such as hip-hop and contemporary dance continue to echo these ancient movements, often unknowingly carrying with them the same sacred intent. Look at the festivals that take place across the globe, from the Caribbean to New Orleans, from Africa to the streets of Paris. The vibrant colors, the music, the dance, they all reflect a deep spiritual heritage rooted in African traditions. Carnival, Mardi Gras, and other such celebrations carry forward the rich customs and rituals of African religions, connecting participants not just to their cultural roots, but to a larger spiritual force. These festivals serve as modern-day reflections of ancient spiritual practices, where the collective energy of a community comes together to celebrate life, love, and the divine. Even in our daily lives, there are elements of African spirituality that continue to influence us. The rituals of honoring ancestors, the use of symbols and amulets for protection and healing, the connection to nature and the elements, all of these practices are woven into the spiritual fabric of modern society. Whether we realize it or not, African spirituality has become a part of our lives, bringing healing and strength, often in the most unexpected places. So, as we continue to move forward in time, we must recognize the importance of these spiritual roots. We are not just connected to the past through stories and legends. We are connected through the very music we hear, the dances we perform, and the rituals we uphold in our lives. African spirituality is not something of the past. It is a living, breathing force that continues to shape the world, filling us with a sense of unity, healing, and divine connection. Ancient African religion and the Bible. Now, let us turn our attention to a question that has stirred the hearts and minds of many. Could the ancient African religions have influenced the Bible? When we look at the rich spiritual traditions of Africa, filled with divine symbols, rituals, and beliefs, it's hard not to see the parallels with the sacred texts that have shaped Christianity. When we think about the story of Moses, one of the most important figures in the Bible, what comes to mind? Many recall the story of Moses leading the Israelites out of Egypt, parting the Red Sea, and receiving the Ten Commandments. But what if we told you that the roots of this story, of Moses, the Pharaoh, and the land of Egypt, are deeply tied to the same African spiritual practices that shaped ancient Egyptian religion? Moses, raised in the Pharaoh's household, was not only a man of faith, but one who was immersed in the culture and spiritual traditions of Egypt. The teachings and beliefs that shaped his life were, at their core, influenced by the very religion of Egypt, a land known for its deep connection to the divine and the spiritual realms. Moreover, the ancient Egyptian religion shares many similarities with the biblical teachings, particularly in the symbolism and rituals. Take, for example, the concept of divine judgment, which is prevalent in both African religions and the Bible. In Egyptian spirituality, the soul was weighed against the feather of Ma'at, symbolizing truth and justice, much like the Christian concept of divine judgment and salvation. The Egyptian afterlife, with its intricate rituals and the journey of the soul, mirrors many aspects of the Christian understanding of the soul's journey after death. Even the story of the Exodus itself can be seen as a reflection of the ancient African religious practice of liberation. Just as Moses led the Israelites out of Egypt, African spiritual leaders throughout history have risen to guide their people to freedom, often invoking the divine in their efforts to overcome oppression. The spiritual strength found in African religions was, and continues to be, a powerful force in the face of adversity, much like the strength that led the Israelites to freedom. When we examine the Bible, we see many echoes of African spiritual practices, whether in the symbolism of water, the role of ancestors, or the use of sacred rituals to invoke divine favor. These connections are not coincidental. They represent a deeper, shared spiritual heritage that transcends borders and time periods. The ancient African religions and the teachings found in the Bible both share a common thread, a belief in the divine, a reverence for the ancestors, and a deep connection to the spiritual world. The story of Moses and the Exodus is just one example of how African spiritual beliefs may have influenced biblical narratives. But it's important to recognize that the impact of African spirituality on the Bible is not confined to one story or one belief system. The ancient religions of Africa, with their rich symbolism and deep spiritual practices, have left an indelible mark on the spiritual traditions of the world. These influences are not only seen in the Bible, but also in the broader Christian tradition, shaping the way we view God, the divine, and our connection to the spiritual realm. As we explore these connections, it becomes clear that African spirituality is not something separate from the Abrahamic religions. It is an integral part of the spiritual tapestry of the world. The wisdom, the rituals, and the divine knowledge that have been passed down through generations are not just relics of the past. They are the foundation upon which many of our spiritual beliefs rest today. In the end, understanding the influence of African spirituality on the Bible helps us realize that our spiritual heritage is more interconnected than we often think. The teachings of ancient Africa, with their profound wisdom and understanding of the divine, continue to guide us, heal us, and shape our faith in ways that are deeper and more powerful than we can imagine. The political forces and the fear of African religion's power. The strength of African spirituality was not simply in its rituals or deities. It was in its ability to unite people, to transcend boundaries, and to inspire resistance against oppression. This very power, its ability to bring together diverse groups under one spiritual banner, was the reason it became such a threat to colonial and imperial powers. Throughout history, when these religions spread across the African continent, they didn't just form the basis of individual worship, they became the bedrock for entire societies, empowering the people, giving them a sense of identity and purpose. It is this unyielding strength that colonial powers feared most. They understood that a unified people, a people bound by a common faith, could rise up and challenge any force that sought to oppress them. The rise of European colonialism in Africa wasn't just an expansion of borders, it was a calculated effort to conquer not just the land, but the very spirit of its people. Colonial powers recognized that the strongest tool they could use to control African nations wasn't just military might, it was cultural domination. To fully enslave a people, they had to erase their identity, rewrite their history, and most crucially, dismantle their belief systems. What better way to achieve this than by replacing African religions with Christianity and suppressing the indigenous faiths that had kept African societies strong for millennia? Let's take a closer look at this suppression. When the first European missionaries arrived on the African continent, their mission was not only to preach the Christian gospel, but to obliterate the deeply ingrained spiritual practices that were foundational to African societies. These missionaries didn't just seek to convert individuals, they sought to erase entire belief systems. In many instances, sacred sites were desecrated, temples were destroyed, and ancient rituals were forbidden. What was once a source of power and unity was now seen as something backward and pagan. The arrival of Christianity wasn't just a religious shift, it was a direct attack on the spiritual foundation of African identity. The strength of African religions lay in their ability to bind communities together in resistance to any form of oppression. Take, for example, the widespread Christianization of the African continent during the colonial era. It wasn't just that Christianity became the dominant religion, it was the manner in which it was imposed. Entire villages were forced to abandon their traditional beliefs and adopt the foreign practices of a new religion. This wasn't a peaceful process, it was violent and coercive. Sacred altars were replaced by crosses, spiritual leaders were demonized, and sacred songs were banned. This was not a simple conversion, it was cultural warfare. In many African societies, religion was intricately connected to leadership. Kings, queens, and rulers weren't just political figures, they were spiritual leaders, guided by divine authority. This concept was deeply ingrained in the governance of African empires. The rulers of these great civilizations were seen as mediators between the divine and the earthly realms. Their legitimacy came not from their military prowess alone, but from their spiritual connection to the gods and ancestors. This connection was sacred, and it bound the people to their leaders in a powerful way. When the colonizers sought to eradicate African religions, they weren't simply undermining the spiritual lives of the people. They were attacking the very foundation of African governance, seeking to break the bond between ruler and community, between the people and their spirituality. This is where the true power of African religions was revealed. It was not just about belief, it was about community, identity, and collective strength. In African spiritual practices, religion was a force for unity, giving people the strength to endure hardship and fight back against forces of oppression. This is why the colonial powers were so fearful of African spirituality. They knew that as long as the people remained united by their faith, they would continue to resist. One of the most significant examples of this resistance can be seen in the Vodou religion in Haiti. During the Haitian Revolution, the enslaved Africans who practiced Vodou used their spiritual beliefs to unite and rally against the French colonial powers. The famous ceremony at Bois Cayman, where the revolutionaries gathered and invoked the gods for strength, is a testament to the power of African spirituality to inspire resistance. Vodou was not just a set of religious rituals, it was a battle cry, a declaration of autonomy, and a unifying force for the oppressed. The French colonizers, fearful of the power this religion gave to the enslaved people, sought to eradicate it, but they failed. Vodou continued to thrive, helping the Haitian people to eventually win their freedom and establish the first independent black republic in the world. This story of Vodou is not unique. Across Africa, from the Zulu to the Ashanti to the Yoruba, spiritual practices were not only a means of worship, they were tools of empowerment. The connection between religion and resistance was clear. African spirituality was not merely a set of beliefs about gods and ancestors, but a living, breathing force that could unite communities in their fight for freedom. In fact, it was often the spiritual leaders who guided the resistance movements, using their influence to rally people to stand up against colonial rule. So why were these religions so feared? It was not simply because they were different, but because they were powerful. The gods and ancestors in African spirituality were not distant, abstract beings. They were present, active, and involved in the lives of the people. This sense of divine proximity, the belief that the gods walked with them, gave the African people a unique strength. They knew that they were not alone, that they were backed by a powerful spiritual force that could not be defeated by foreign invaders or oppressive rulers. The resilience of African religion was the resilience of the African people themselves. This fear of African spirituality didn't just stop with the colonization of Africa. The legacy of this suppression can still be felt today. Across the African diaspora, from the Caribbean to the Americas, African religions continue to serve as a source of strength, identity, and resistance. Whether it's the practice of candomblé in Brazil, Santeria in Cuba, or the continued reverence for ancestral spirits in various parts of Africa, these religions remain a vital part of the African cultural experience. They are not relics of the past. They are living, breathing traditions that continue to provide spiritual nourishment and resistance against oppression. In conclusion, the power of African spirituality is undeniable. It is a force that transcends time, space, and borders. The fear that colonial powers had of these religions was not unfounded. They understood that these belief systems were not just about worship. They were about unity, resistance, and the very survival of African culture. Today, as we reconnect with these traditions, we see how the legacy of these powerful faiths continues to shape the modern world, providing us with the tools to resist oppression and reclaim our strength. As we stand together in the light of this truth, we can begin to heal, to unite, and to honor the rich spiritual legacy that has been passed down to us through generations. As we come to the end of this journey together, I want to take a moment to reflect on the immense power and wisdom that lies in the ancient religions and spiritual practices we've uncovered today. These belief systems, often hidden or suppressed, carry a profound message of strength, unity, and resilience, a message that speaks to us across centuries, across continents. We've seen how these ancient African religions not only built great civilizations, but also provided the very foundation of empowerment for communities, giving them the strength to endure adversity and the wisdom to guide their leaders. Today, we live in a world that is often disconnected from the roots of our spiritual heritage, a world where many of the teachings and traditions that once bound us together have been lost or forgotten. Yet, in the heart of every song, every dance, every ritual passed down through generations, the echoes of those ancient beliefs still resonate. It is through these traditions that we find our strength, our connection to something greater than ourselves. The divine force that once empowered entire nations still resides within us, waiting to be awakened. When we look around at the world today, we may feel overwhelmed by the challenges we face, by the struggles that seem insurmountable. But the story of African spirituality is a story of survival, a story of overcoming oppression, of finding light in the darkest of times. These faiths were not just beliefs, they were lifelines, sources of hope and healing for those who had been silenced, erased, and oppressed. And as we rediscover these teachings, we too can tap into that wellspring of strength, uniting in our shared humanity to create a more just and compassionate world. In this fast-paced world, where distractions are endless and peace often feels out of reach, the ancient wisdom we've discussed today offers us a path back to balance, back to connection. It reminds us that our spiritual lives are not separate from our everyday lives. They are one and the same. Every action, every thought, every breath is an opportunity to honor the divine within and around us. When we reconnect with our spiritual roots, we not only heal ourselves, we heal the world. Perhaps, like me, you've felt the quiet call of these ancient traditions, felt the stirrings of something deep within that longs to reconnect with the sacred. Maybe you've noticed the subtle ways that these powerful beliefs continue to influence your life. Through the music you hear, the dances that move you, the rhythms of your heart. And if this video has helped you see that connection, has sparked something in your soul, then I invite you to take a moment to reflect on the power of this shared journey. If this message has resonated with you, if it has brought you comfort or clarity, then I encourage you to support this channel. If you feel that this video has brought light into your life or helped you navigate through moments of darkness, I humbly ask for your support so I can continue to share these powerful stories, these transformative truths with the world. Every small gesture of encouragement, whether it's a like, a comment, or simply subscribing to this channel, is a step towards creating a global community of healing, understanding, and unity. Your support fuels the energy that keeps this channel alive and thriving, allowing us to dive deeper into these vital discussions and uncover even more truths that can change our world. I also invite you to leave a comment, share your thoughts, your reflections. Perhaps you've seen the power of African spirituality in your own life, or maybe you've encountered some of the same struggles in connecting with your spiritual roots. What have you learned from this journey? What truths are you ready to uncover in your own life? I truly believe that each of us carries a piece of this ancient wisdom, and together we can build a future where these traditions are not only remembered, but celebrated for the strength and healing they bring. As we end this video, remember that the power of these ancient religions is not confined to the past. It's alive and vibrant in our world today. It's within each of us, in the way we live our lives, in the way we treat one another, in the way we connect with the divine. The wisdom of the ancestors calls to us, reminding us of our own strength, our own ability to heal, and our own potential to change the world. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for joining me on this journey of discovery. Your presence here, your energy, and your support mean more to me than words can express. Together, we can continue to awaken the power of these teachings and bring their light into the world. Let's keep exploring, keep learning, and keep healing.